Yo, 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 what's happening, people? Okay, so I just recorded the very first episode, the very first of hopefully many episodes of People from the Internet, which is a new film done on the channel. Some of you might know that I've been saying for a while that I've been wanting to do a interview style, podcast style, conversation style type thing on the channel. That's why I bought that microphone right all in months ago. But this is it. This is what I've been wanting to do for a minute now. So this is it. The first episode talking to Andrew Sennedra. He's a YouTuber, a musician, a comic book fan, a wrestling fan, a heavy metal fan. We talk about all of that. But if you like this sort of stuff, then yeah, let me know and drop any suggestions of other people from the internet that you think I should have a chat with. You know, YouTubers, Instagrammers, TikTokers, or anybody you think I should have a quick conversation with. Well, I say quick, it might not be that quick, but still, a conversation with about their craft, about their art, about the things they're passionate about, and that sort of thing. And yeah, definitely like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think of what's being said. All of that kind of stuff. All helps. Appreciate you guys. Thank you and enjoy. Calling this people from the internet, by the way,
All right.
because it's a kind of phrase that came to me. Like sometimes when I'm talking or when I do live streams, I end up going on these rants, and then by the end of it, I usually say something like, "What do I know? I'm just some guy from the internet."
Yeah.
So it kind of a phrase that stuck with me. It's just people from the internet. But yeah, I mean, you're somebody who I guess I've haven't met in the physical realm, but
No.
we've spoke before, and we've both worked with Jid, and I think we met you through Jid actually,
Yeah.
and yeah, I've watched quite a few of your videos since then. Heavy metal comics. I just come to find recently you do wrestling as well, which I didn't know about, but big up for
Yeah.
that. Um, but yeah, I mean, with yourself though, like I mean, because you started off, I believe, as a drummer, right, in a
Yep.
band. Okay, so how did that come around? Like, what got you into like just deciding that you wanted to express yourself in a creative way and drumming being involved? Like, how did that happen?
Oh, that was, I would say it was sort of forced upon me actually in the beginning. Uh, my brother, everyone wanted to be the singer or the guitar player in bands. Everybody wants to be the hot shot sort of.
Mm,
So they needed a drummer. I was young, and they just sort of put me behind the drum kit, and that's how I started drumming. And then it sort of uh, I didn't stay with it very long at that time because I was like in the middle of like working and school and all this type of stuff, so it sort of faded off. But then they ended up having some drummers and stuff that fell through and things like that. And eventually, I picked it back up, and it just took off from there. At least, like I guess I would say I came about it naturally later on because I wanted to do it more. I started as a guitar player. I started playing guitar when I was like 13, but I didn't really like do too much of that. So, but I always had like the sort of music itch in me, being like I just involved in metal since I was like 8 years old. Being a fan of music that way, so it was sort of a natural progression, I guess, to just sort of pick up instruments. I've always had inclination, I guess, or passion to get into.
mm,
I don't know, writing music, but just starting to play instruments and stuff like that. So that's sort of how it all came about,
okay.
sort of accidental.
So you quite young when you got into heavy metal then. 8 years old. I mean, I don't know what I guess I don't know what the average age of a metal fan is, but that sounds like quite young because I feel like that age. I know certainly for myself and a lot of people I knew anyway were listening to mostly the sort of popular music around at the time,
Oh yeah,
and things like heavy metal for me didn't come till sort of like teenage years. So
yeah.
like, I mean, was it just like was it on the radio? Were your parents into it or something? Or
It was my brother.
okay,
Like he was listening to it, and then I remember getting a blank tape or whatever, and then recording Megadeth's Rust in Peace on it, and then just listening to that
oh,
over and
that is
over
a
again.
classic album. Yeah.
So it just came up about like that. Like I remember a bunch of people even talking to me about movies and stuff when I was younger and being like, "Oh, didn't you like this Disney movie when you were young?" It's like I grew up on horror movies and action movies.
Oh
Like
yeah, 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 yeah.
I had definitely had a different youth than most people. It was very, you know, I was very used to horror and action and heavy metal, like really young, listening to a lot of like dark, heavy stuff and just being like, I enjoy this. It's not disturbing me.
You know what? I think I mean I watched RoboCop for the first time when I was maybe like I think about 9, you know what I mean? At 9, I'm sure, I'm pretty sure it's before 10, 8 or 9. And I mean, you can watch RoboCop now it's just whatever, right? But
Yeah,
back then, this is like 88 maybe. It was
yeah,
super violent, you know. But I feel like from there for me, like I just became somewhat obsessed with violent movies and trying to find, you know, the most violent films you could I could, and there's a lot of stuff came from, you know, China, like with you know, the Hong Kong action series,
oh yeah,
John Woo. You know, I was watching a lot of those during the '90s. You know, so yeah, I feel like what you said about having a quite a different childhood. Yeah, I was definitely. I think for myself as well. It's just like I wasn't into a lot of the same stuff that other people were into. Okay, but I mean, you were so what? Well, was heavy metal before comics, or was comics before heavy metal for you? Like, what was
well,
that?
I guess I actually think I'd say comics was before then. Like at least, yeah, as a kid, like because I remember actually buying some when I was young at like 4 years old and having a very select few, and I still have one from 1986 originally and some others. But then, yeah, I don't know. I guess I just stopped collecting comics when I was around 12, I would say. I don't know why. I guess I think it was probably because of music. I
Mm,
started collecting music and CDs and stuff like that. I had a cassette collection and I just stopped collecting comics and getting in and staying into them. But then my friend, like I don't know how many years ago, probably early 30s or something like that. So maybe 3 or 4 years ago, he introduced me. He kept talking about mangas all the
oh
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He'd been into this stuff. I didn't even know he was into a lot of this anime and mangas for so long. He never mentioned it, but then he sort of brought up comics and these things, and I was like, oh man, I should dig back into it
mm,
and see what's out there. See, there must be another sort of cult realm of comics like there is for metal, right? Like there's got to be.
mm.
So I always like to explore the more obscure stuff because I feel like that's where the creativity mostly is just
Yeah,
unhinged. People are
yeah,
allowed to be themselves more. They're not as controlled.
yeah.
So yeah, I got into I found Fables. I don't know if you've heard of Fables or not, but I found Fables and that was an amazing series. And it just sort of went up from there. I started getting in more and more, and I started digging into more obscure comics and I collect some Marvel and stuff like that here and there, but I want to find like more of the creative artists. I love
Mm.
Spawn though. Like Spawn is, I think, sort of I don't know if I want to say the epitome of a cult series sort of taking off, but it definitely does have it is sort of that cult series that started and then grew, and I felt like that's a really important series to like sort of hinge on for creativity. Todd McFarlane wanting to leave Marvel and join forces and create Image and give creativity back to the content creators.
So do you find like, I mean, when I was reading comics, mostly was sort of teenage years again for me. Like I remember a little bit when I was a kid, but I don't really start getting into things like sort of Spider-Man comics and things like that till maybe sort of teenage years. And by then, of course, Spider-Man, Marvel, you know, that's all mainstream as far as sort
Yeah,
of comics goes. Um, and then you sort of mentioned manga. I did read a little bit of manga stuff. What was it? Was it Death? No, was it Death Note? Sorry, it was Attack on Titan that I read a little bit of, and you know, from Japanese style again, but that's all sort of mainstream as well in the manga world. So do you find
yeah.
like you talked about the creativity of some more sort of obscure, I mean, obscure comics versus say the mainstream stuff. I mean, I guess it's similar with a lot of things where you have like independent musicians or independent filmmakers, and just the stuff that happens in that world is vastly different to the stuff that happens in the mainstream world. And
Yeah.
so for you with comics, you just find like, I mean, I guess that the limitations is really just your on what's your mind. But I mean, how
Yeah.
much difference are we talking in terms of like, are we talking about story, talking visuals, or we just talk like when it comes to difference, we say that the more obscure independent stuff versus the more mainstream stuff that everybody knows, at the DCs and the Marvels, because Marvel and
I
DC could get pretty deep as well at times, you know.
Yeah, I feel like they more so where Marvel and DC would let their creators do a little more back, I guess, in like the 80s
Mm.
when that sort of started coming up with like a Frank Miller was right when was doing
Oh yeah.
Daredevil or something like that or Batman. And but I feel like the difference is probably mostly like violence.
All
You
right.
know,
Now we're
do
talking.
doing topics that might sort of be taboo as well. Maybe like Spawn touches on certain things that others might not. Todd McFarlane would probably bend the rules a little bit for what was appropriate, I guess. I definitely know some obscure comics will just, something like the original Judge Dredd from 1983. It's just like all anything goes type of violence. Uh, I don't know how many topics the Judge Dredd really went on to that was like, taboo or anything like that, but there's no nudity or anything like that. But there's definitely in the obscure genres, there is stuff like that, especially in certain publishers will allow that as well. Is let have because I do actually have some that are more graphic adult. Called one's called Pestilence, Brothers Dracul. They're more well, even Fables, those are both more, they allow nudity and violence and stuff like that. So they're a little bit more on, I guess, like the obscure side. Well, I don't know if I'd say obscure, but they're definitely on the side of touchy subjects.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I guess a type of type of things that are quite sensitive
Yeah,
when it
ones
comes
that,
to sort of social issues, maybe,
yeah,
or
ones,
things going
oh
on in the
yeah,
world.
yeah, ones that like I guess they want to keep away from mainstream audience, stuff like that, teenagers, kids. They're I guess they're targeting or what their targets are usually I guess kids and that, but I guess they change. I don't know if DC and Marvel have too much stuff that's geared towards adults. I'm not 100% sure on that though.
They kind of do and they kind of don't, in my experience. I mean, they definitely have themes that are quite well. When I say adults, I'm not thinking like nudity type,
Mm.
that kind of adult, but well, maybe a little bit as well, that too. But they definitely have sort of more, say, mature themes and things like that. But it is, of course, all sort of focused around, superheroes, the whole sort of superpowers and okay, I guess you could call it mystical in some degrees, and things like that, things of say of otherworldly type stuff. So
Yeah,
although the themes themselves could be quite mature, you could be dealing with things like death, you know, loving someone that doesn't love you back, jealousy. You could things that a lot of us can relate to. It is
no, yeah,
ultimately centered around this thing, which I guess till even now is still looked upon as mostly a kids thing, even though plenty of grown-ups do enjoy comics, and there's plenty of comics that are written for grown-ups. But I guess it still
yeah.
has that kind of thing attached
They,
to it. I remember the
they
first
never
comic.
really they almost never really cross the line, I guess, DC and Marvel
Yeah.
compared to what other ones will do. Like I guess Punisher might have been an older one originally that like was probably, I guess,
Yeah.
quite violent for kids. That would be the only one that really comes to mind off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I
No.
definitely think there were a couple more, but
Well, to my memory, and to be fair, it was a long time ago, but the first comic I remember reading was a Judge Dredd comic, which I think my auntie bought for me. One of my aunties bought for me, like I would have been, I don't know, like young, like 7, 8, that kind of age. Maybe a
Yeah,
little bit older actually. It might have been after. I'm thinking, it might have been after RoboCop. So yeah, maybe, but around about that kind of age. And I mean, it probably wasn't super violent. It's certainly not compared to stuff now. But I do remember thinking it was quite, you know, out there. I remember like there was like the art style was quite gritty. There was guns shooting and and the language wasn't I mean it wasn't like hardcore swearing, but it wasn't always that clean either.
yeah,
So I guess there's inklings. That's always kind of been there. Well, maybe not always, but at least for a while.
yeah. Very true when it comes to Judge Dredd. Very interesting series, I thought, from 1983. Definitely foreshadowed the way the world is actually today.
Yes. Did you see the movie? Well, they got done two movies now, but the was the Stallone movie in like 90 something, 95, 96.
Yeah.
That got a lot of flack because he took off his helmet, and I don't know. Apparently, it was not the first time he took off his helmet, but I don't know. Fans could be interesting people sometimes, so.
Yeah, I'm like, whatever. I try not, I don't nitpick over the little things. Sometimes I feel like that's just, too stressful to worry about.
Mhm. But I do think there's quite a lot of crossover between heavy metal fans, comic fans, and wrestling fans. And I feel like, I mean, of course, you could like one and not the other if you want to, but it does seem to me,
Yeah,
at least, in my experience, that somebody who's into heavy metal, oftentimes they like wrestling as well. Um,
yeah.
Certainly a lot of video games as well. I feel like people who are into video games tend to like wrestling or heavy metal. So I feel like there's a lot of crossover in like the geek world with certain things with heavy metal, wrestling, comics, video games. I mean, I don't think you're into video games so much yourself, but in terms of like comics, wrestling, and comics, wrestling, and heavy metal. I mean, what do you think the sort of cross appeal is with that when it comes to that sort of thing?
I definitely agree with you. I feel like they actually all have sort of a hidden attachment to each other that people don't pick up on. I think it's a lot of it's being able to express yourself,
Mm,
and do things creatively that not a lot of other genres or things will let you do. And even like you do have the different levels of like mainstream, maybe a little bit less mainstream, and then you're just like hardcore obscure fans.
mm,
And I feel like the crossover is easily, you have a lot of things that are attached. For instance, like wrestling, you have your themes, metal themes go together. Characters, you can have characters go from wrestling to comics. You have even stories, you can have stories in metal. Like there's a lot of also dark avenues that can be played out in obviously metal, comics, and wrestling. Like there's definitely a lot of things that relate to one another through those three genres. Even video games to a degree, you can sort of attach in there. They obviously come with music, darker themes, uh, all kinds of stuff like that. So there are quite a few different themes and things that tie together in those genres of stuff. I definitely find that's why I'm interested in all of them, because you
mm.
do have creativity, art. Again, you have your comic book art, the covers, album art, same type of thing. Especially the album art in metal today is really standing out more and more as they're getting more pieces, especially like power metal bands that look like comic book covers.
Right.
um, Even the booklets are more expanded upon with pieces of art as well. So also bands are coming out with their own comics as well. They're diving into doing their concept story in an album, and then actually doing a limited edition like 150 comics or something like that as well. So
Mm.
you're definitely seeing this crossover in so much of that. You're seeing a bunch of wrestlers now coming out in metal shirts or having like heavy metal themes, entrance themes and stuff like that. So
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think I mean, I mean, I think I got into wrestling. Well, I could probably get good wrestling years ago. I think when I mainly started watching wrestling, I mean, I remember it was a Jim Johnson, I believe, in WWF at the time, who was the main music guy, and a lot of the entrance themes, yeah, definitely had that kind of hard guitar to it, those drums, and even the ones that weren't strictly speaking rock, in themes, they still kind of had that kind of rock element to it,
yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely a thing. I don't know, maybe that's just Jim Johnson style, I guess.
Well, yeah,
Um,
like the Bret Hart style guitar that he has, and Shawn Michaels theme and stuff
mm,
like that back in the day were definitely more hard rock driven.
mm. Shawn Michaels' theme is so iconic, though, isn't it? Though I feel like even if you're not a wrestling fan, you just know when that you know what it is, right? I mean, I feel like to certain wrestling themes, like even if you're not a wrestling fan, the moment you hear like the first few notes, you know exactly what it is. They just
Oh
stand
yeah,
out that much.
I definitely think Hulk Hogan had that with his theme as
Mm.
well. You
Yeah,
know, definitely.
his theme was definitely quite I guess more rock and roll inspired, maybe like 50s rock and roll, 50, not maybe not 50s, maybe that far back, but certainly kind of that, you know maybe more 80s rock and roll inspired, actually, with was it
I'm not sure if
was it Real American?
yeah, I'm not sure if he wrote that or not. I know he did a music video with her where he was playing bass. That's sort of what I remember, but
I think I remember seeing that, actually, now you mentioned it. I mean, I don't. I'm gonna have to look it up to maybe refresh my memory. But now, when you mentioned that, I feel like I have a memory of seeing a Hulk Hogan in a music video, like doing this sort of thing with a.
I
Oh,
know he did want to be a musician before being a wrestler.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
I
I
don't.
know
That's interesting.
that. I'm not sure I like if he played bass strictly or if he played guitar as well, but I definitely know he wanted to be a musician beforehand. That's why he used Jimi Hendrix theme for his WCW days when he was in the NWO. He used the Jimi Hendrix song.
Mm,
Uh, don't remember the title of it, but he used that in WCW days.
mm. Yeah, Hulk Hogan's career, though. I mean, his wrestling career goes back years. Like, I don't think people realize. I mean, I'm sure people realize, but you know what I mean. He's 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 been around a lot. Cause I can remember, like, I would have been early teen. I mean, this is secondary school for me, so this is maybe like 12, 13 years old, right?
Yeah,
And the way you watch wrestling in the UK was through a service called Sky TV, and where they put a satellite dish on your house and it connects to the radio or whatever, and
yeah,
it's TV that you pay extra for. So kind of, I guess, kind of like
yeah.
a cable that you have, but you have a dish inside your house, outside your house. Anyway, we didn't
Okay.
have Sky, right? We didn't have Sky at the time, but some of my friends had it, so they would watch wrestling. And I can remember, like, some people would bring like the toys into school, and it just sounded really cool to my ears. Like, this is so awesome. And the only wrestling they showed on regular television was like sort of the old school with British wrestlers, which was alright, but it just wasn't as
Yeah,
exciting as the American wrestling, right?
yeah.
And some of my friends might lend me tapes and that sort of thing, and so I might watch it every now and then, or if I was at somebody's house, and it was just the coolest thing, you know what I mean? But I kind of forgot what my point was, to be honest with you. But
Talking about Hogan
but
going back decades.
but yeah, it's like, yeah, that was it. Hulk Hogan, that was it. But yeah, Hulk Hogan, he was the big star right back then, and this is a time when I'm not watching wrestling so much. And then years later, when I finally get to a point where I can watch it on a more regular basis, he wasn't
Yeah,
wrestling as much, but I think he was in WCW at that point. In fact, yeah, he was in WCW at that point. Then he came back to WWE, and yeah, he's older now. He's not doing as much as he used to, but he was still moving. You know what I mean? He was still going pretty strong. I remember he had that fight with that wrestling match with Brock Lesnar. Oh, and of course the classic one with The Rock back
oh
in,
yeah.
was it 2000, 2001 at WrestleMania? I
Oh,
think something like that. But
I fell out of a big period there just because I didn't get into or I couldn't really get behind WWE for a while.
mm,
I fell out of it. I started watching ECW
Hmm.
back in the day because the hardcore stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of aerial, athletic, crazy stuff. So
Yeah, ECW was nuts. Like I don't see a lot, but the stuff that I did see of it back in the day before it got bought over, it was crazy. Like they would, was it Tommy Dreamer doing some
yeah,
madness? Rhino, the Dudley Boys with the I think Mick Foley was there for a little while. I think.
yeah, he would have been a little bit earlier, but he was definitely there.
But yeah, it's all barbed wires and bro. they weren't joking around when they said extreme. Like they weren't messing
Yeah,
around. They said
I mean,
extreme. They meant extreme.
yeah, and that's sort of again when we're talking about like sort of how comics, wrestling, and metal all have their obscure genres. Well, wrestling does when it comes to like
Mm,
the extreme or the death match tournaments and stuff like that. That nobody really sees unless they seek it out. To try to find is the death match world is definitely a world that is not for the faint at heart. Like you have to have a strong stomach or you might
yeah,
throw
yeah.
up. Some of the stuff that you see, I've seen guys like nearly die.
Yeah, no, that was a madness. Like the way they would jump off stuff and some of the way they land. You know, some of those weren't planned either. Um, but yeah, I guess ECW is a good example of when you talked about sort of say independence and mainstream. Because when ECW got bought over by WWE, I mean, it was ECW in name, literally in name only. Like it was not the same, not even close to what it was. It
Yeah,
was highly polished. A lot of the extreme matches were either gone or just toned down immensely.
yeah,
It definitely got overshadowed by the main sort of WWE roster, and eventually they just pretty much just killed it off in the end because it just wasn't really doing much. But yeah, it was massively different, from when WWE took it over, and it just became this. It went from being this raw, unfiltered thing to a corporate product.
yeah. You can really see that's a great example of seeing what happens when you take something that is, creative control or not creative control. That's just balls to the wall sort of, and then
Mm,
you get it into the mainstream, and it is like you said, corporate. How it totally changes everything, and I think that everybody wants, that clean cut mainstream band, that clean cut, you know, sort of kids type comics, and same with the wrestling, right? And it's like, well, you don't always want to do all that all the time because I feel like you're just limiting your audience. So it's,
mm. It's kind of interesting because part of the reason behind those sorts of changes is to do with like sponsorship and advertising, and the fact that a lot of times brands who are paying to advertise in a space don't want to advertise in something that could be considered, you know, maybe violent or too sexy or
yeah,
things like that. But the interesting thing is to me is that I feel like a lot of these advertisers are quite out of touch with the general public because I mean, granted, sure, I know not everybody's into the big violence and stuff. There's definitely plenty of people who don't care for it. But, there's quite a few people that do. And I feel like it's kind of refusal to not acknowledge certain things. In fact, YouTube has that issue when it comes to how they do adverts. And there was a whole thing with the whole thing with OnlyFans had that issue. And it's the
oh
same
yeah,
reason why Facebook had made a lot. But it's pretty much comes down to the same thing. Advertisers don't want to do certain things. And it's like, okay, cool. I get that you don't want to advertise in a space where you feel like you might not make money. But then
yeah.
when you peel the curtains back a little bit, you think, well, there's actually a lot of people who do care for this. So you might actually be making money if you advertise in those spaces. So it's just interesting how advertising and marketing and sort of sponsorship can dictate the final product of a thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that. I've seen it before with metal bands where specific songs weren't allowed to be on albums because they were too raunchy or something, and the labels didn't want the backlash and stuff. So the certain songs were left off of albums, or certain album covers were nixed at the last minute, and something else was just thrown up, and people were like, you look back at history, you're like, why is this album cover so stupid? And it was like, well, because that was like a last minute decision that they had to make because of the label and not wanting to
Mm.
offend people. So like, Wasp, their song "Animal" for the longest time was left off of their first album in 1984. Like for I want to say nearly 20 years that their first song "Animal" wasn't on that album that it was supposed to be. It was left to a single or B side initially. So because of its sort of vulgar concept behind it, I guess, and the sexual nature, raunchy nature to it, especially with the PMRC back in the 80s. It really put a halt on what bands were allowed to do and stuff like that until they started putting that like parental sticker on everything.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Was it parental advice? Oh, that was kind of a badge of honor back in the day because I remember going into certain shops and they'd have the sticker on the album and
Yeah.
you had to be over 18 to buy it. And you could sometimes you could walk up to the counter and they were like, "No, go, we can't buy this." But every now and then, you might put it on the counter, maybe to turn your head a little bit. And the guy, he knows you're like 12 or whatever, 30, whoever old I was at the time. I'm sure they know, but he's just looking at you like, whatever, man.
Yeah.
Just tells you the CD, and you walking out like, yes.
Yeah, like some guys were probably like, I don't care about this stuff. I'll just let sell this anyways. I'm looking for a sale. It's like I'm sure like a few swear words ain't gonna hurt this kid.
In fact, just what? There was this used to be a VHS rental shop, a video rental shop, in my local area, and they would rent you like tapes for £1 a night, right? And what the guy said to us, what he said to me and my brother, and bear in mind this is like 13, 14 at the time. So he said, yeah, just get one of your parents to sign up. Once that's done, then you can come in and rent whatever you want. And I guess he just needed an adult's name on the actual book. So if it occasionally checks, right, it's an adult's name on the book. But yeah,
Yeah.
we'd walk in there, you know, a couple of pounds, pick up a few like 18 rated movies, some violent horror movies, some, like I can remember like Exorcist was one of them. I'm sure some, soft porno was probably in there as well. We'll just be picking up just a bunch of stuff that we're clearly not old enough, have no business watching, and just goes to the counter, like give the guy the money, be like, all right, cool, yeah, put it in a box for you, and you come out, you bring it back the next day, and it was like, yeah, we do that again, just like, yeah, there we go. But yeah, some people just like were like that. It was like, you know what, they know you're young, they know you're underage, they know they're not supposed to do it, but they just do it anyways.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much how I grew up. My What I got to watch, like what my dad just he didn't care. Like I was watching Friday 13th at the age of 4 and 5. Scared the crap out of me, but I was just like I thought it was all
Friday
real.
13th. Oh man. Yeah, I think no wonder you're into like heavy metal. And if you watch it at 4 years old, it's like, yeah, that makes sense now. That makes sense.
Yeah, so and definitely the music too. Like I had a bunch of bands that were probably parental advisor or didn't have it, but had very dark themes and stuff on it, like bands like Typo Negative and Sentenced, and those two bands would be like, oh, these are for more older people because they have a very dark theme behind some of the music, the lyrics and stuff. They're probably not might be mind warping for a younger kid, but
Mm,
that was stuff I was listening to pretty young as well.
mm,
I also felt that was also helpful though. Like what they don't realize is like some of this music, some of these comics, wrestling stuff like this that actually teaches you things that your parents either won't teach you or don't know how to teach you about like life and stuff. They don't realize
yeah.
that this stuff is actually in the music and things like that. So
Oh no, 100% agree with that. 100% agree with that. I think there's so much depth to a lot of sort of music, movies, and I think it's very easy to get into the whole, oh, there's too much swearing, there's too much this, too much that. And but sure, I guess it's a consideration when you are talking about younger people, but at the same time, it's like I think when you look beyond that, you realize there's a lot of messages about whether it's about going through life, about whether it's going through certain things in society. Like I remember watching Boys in the Hood when I was really young and just thinking, oh, this is the cool gangster movie, right? And then watching it again a bit later on in life and thinking, oh, actually, no, this is really deep. You know, it's talking about life in this part of the world, and how society unfairly treats people. And there's a lot in there when you kind of mature a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot of lessons you could have there for kids to kind of grow up in and understand that your environment doesn't dictate who you must become. You know, you have choices, and you can, you know, you don't have to go down certain routes because that's where all your friends are going, or that's where it feels like you're being pushed towards. You know, you can kind of look beyond that and see that there are things out there that, yeah, it might be hard or it might be difficult and this that, and the other, but there are things out there and it's better for you out there. You know, so
Yeah, I definitely could say like those types of movies and these types of bands and stuff actually prepare you for life a little better. They let you know that like
mm,
not everything is like just fine and easy, and like Stallone said, rainbows and sunshine or whatever in Rocky. But like
so say it again, rebels and stuff like what?
where in Rocky, the one
Yeah.
Rocky where Stallone's talking about rainbows and sunshines. The whole world isn't like that. The world, knocks you down. It's whether you get back up.
Oh right, yeah. I know that quote. I know the quote.
Yeah, but I'm saying like sitting there thinking like these things prepare you more. Whereas I find a lot of people, if you're living off of Disney, you think everything's just going to be handed to you, or sort of use everything.
Mm,
Everything's going to have a happy ending. Prince Charming's waiting for you to, to kiss you and wake you up, and they come to a rude awakening one day that like that's not how the world is, and not
yeah.
everybody's just going to cater to you. So I
Mm.
think almost like those movies might actually have a more of a detrimental effect.
You know what? I could agree with that, actually. I mean, don't get me wrong. I feel like there is a place in this world for everything. There's a place for the Disneys and the cutesy cuddlies and the rainbows. There's a place for that. But yeah, I mean, when reality hits, and the reality might not be as nice as a Disney movie for some people. You know, the reality might not be as easy a life as it is that like, especially if you go to school, or it might be different in Canada, I don't know. But schools over here, when I was in school, it was very much, you go to school, you get your qualifications, you get a job, and everything's like great. That's pretty much what school tells you. And a lot of like TV shows at the time kind of promote that kind of image as well. And then when you come out of that, you realize it doesn't quite always work that way. Maybe for some, sure, but not for
Yeah.
everybody. And when you realize how unprepared for certain things you are, and you're just like, shit, man, like what have I been doing all this time? You know what I mean? It's like what? So yeah,
I,
I think we need that balance of everything when we're coming up. That hopefully things are good for you, but if it's not, you need to be prepared. You know.
well, I definitely think I'd say like metal, you know, sort of hardened me, to a degree. Like the where I grew up, things weren't always just like easy and that type of stuff. So it it definitely prepares you for some degree some of this stuff like where like I guess like my school wasn't really that good. And so like a lot of these things I was prepared for, and I the way I grew up, it prepared me for so much more than what other people like. I still have people like totally shocked when somebody acts a certain way, and I'm like, for me, like dealing with this pandemic and dealing with people at jobs and stuff was actually quite easy. Like, this what I face in the world a lot of the time doesn't really bother me, is because of the way I was raised.
Hmm.
So I can see how like there's that worked out for me, I guess, having a bit of, I don't know, I guess the non-Disney world put towards me, I guess.
So here's a question, then. I guess this is probably going to be a common question that a lot of people are going to get asked in various interviews and podcasts and whatever else that happens. But how did the pandemic affect you? Because it seemed like one of these things that it affected people in so many different ways. But for yourself, like, would you say that? Because I know, I mean, there's parts where I feel like I struggled. Then there's parts where I felt like I got this. So for me, it was definitely a mixture of a few different feelings. How was it for you, especially when it comes to things like you're doing YouTube, you're in a band, you're all these things that you're trying to do, all these things that you got to keep going, and then now you got this global pandemic on top of it. So what was that like for you?
Oh, for uh, like it didn't really bother me because I'm like more inside anyways. Like I started doing more stuff. I started exploring more bands and trying to do more videos for my metal channel. My band itself, like I guess we haven't done nearly as much, but we didn't really have too much going on, and we're only like a two piece anyways. I look at it as like quite a positive for me because um, I just hunkered down and started working on my own comic. I started taking this concept that I had that I was working on for about a year, trying to figure out the direction I wanted to go. And I've just sat down and written out a whole bunch of it. I have like 30 issues worth of material now. Even like a couple secondary ideas for other comics, concepts that I've come up with. So for me, like I've spent a lot of the pandemic just sitting here creating stuff, doing new channels, like just showing off my comics, doing the wrestling channel just for fun with my friend, talking about AEW and again some of the more lesser known promotions. So I spend a lot of the time just trying to be creative and like I treat my Monday to Friday like a work week. I just get up, I sit down, I check messages, see if any bands have messaged me, want to do a YouTube video for them, and then I figure out what I want to do in that day. Do I want to find more bands? Do I want to try to do some writing? Like, do I do editing for one of my videos or something like that? I just sort of treat it as a job, and I feel like I've been just pretty fine with it.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's very interesting. I think yeah, it's like because it's one of these things where I guess it gives you a lot of time to do things, and then I guess
Oh yeah,
what you do at that time is what it comes down to. And then there's so much going on, so much you maybe could do, so much you maybe want to do, so much maybe even though you got the time, you might not be able to do right now. And I know there's quite a lot of people who did things like sort of similar things where they would start to be more creative and maybe started writing that book they'd always been thinking about.
yeah,
And then there's a lot of other people who kind of felt like even with the extra time, just wasn't the right time for them. So it's such a it is definitely been a strange, weird time. For us that hopefully we don't have to go through again. But
yeah. Like
it's yeah. I mean, for me, it was like I guess the changes for me weren't like it weren't like I had to uproot my life and everything was upside down. But certainly I had to do things differently because like not as much money coming in, so that's a consideration.
oh
So
yeah,
you got to figure out, okay, well, what else can I do to not starve to death, right?
yeah.
And then at the same time, whilst yeah, still trying to maintain the YouTube and still trying to be creative and not go insane, and yeah, try to figure out what does that look like, what's that balance like now over the next coming, however long it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, the definitely thing would be for everybody was probably just trying to make sure you had money coming in, right?
Mm.
Or you had money. For me, like I don't know if it's like a good thing or a positive thing, but I'm kind of quite cheap. So I was saving
Comes in
quite a bit
handy.
of money.
Yeah.
Like I just I spend money only on a few specific things. Like I don't buy a lot of comics. I just buy a little bit when I want them. I don't buy every single album that comes out
Mm.
just for the sake of it. Like I buy what I want to have in my collection and stuff. So uh, yeah, I've been able to stretch my bank account pretty good.
Speaking of buying albums, actually, what's your thoughts? What's your feelings on the whole thing about streaming music? Things like Spotify or YouTube Music, Apple Music, sort of stream music platforms. Because on one hand, it's super convenient for the user, right, to have
Yeah,
millions of songs at their disposal that they only pay, £10 a month or whatever it is, right?
yeah,
You pay a
exactly.
relatively small amount for the month. Um, but then the downside is that it doesn't necessarily support artists. And I mean, yeah, you get something, but we're talking like literally something, like a tiny amount. Like, was it half a penny, less than half a penny? So what's your
Yeah.
feelings on that as a musician and as a music fan?
Um, I guess I could sit there like as a writer myself and be like, "Eh, it's horrible. I'm not making any money or something like that." But I do see the split side. You know, you can get a lot of listeners. You can sort of get out there a little bit more and get more songs listened to and purchased. You know, and get more mainstream, get more followers and things like that. But ultimately, like you're not making very much off of that. You're just hoping that if you get a million listeners, that a handful of them do transition over to like full-time fans and will potentially buy tickets when we you get back to concerts,
Mm,
or buy online tickets. I guess you could do the online shows or buy CDs and other merch, right? So that's sort of, I think, the idea for probably like 99 or 95% of the bands on Spotify. They're just trying to hope that, hey, we got a million listens. Let's hope they transition over.
mm,
On the flip side, it's like it is sort of detrimental, I guess, to the obscure bands or the lesser known bands that are, like people are just so sort of, I don't want to say spoiled or something like that, but that's all they're used to is just, streaming and downloading music for, like you said, £10 a month. I've never used a streaming service, so I don't know what it costs
okay.
me here, but um, yeah, it's sort of that, takes away from people actually wanting to buy a shirt or buying the CDs and
Mm,
vinyls. I don't know what the genre, like what it is per genre, what the fans are like. Like if, let's say, rap fans, do they go out and buy CDs still, or pop fans? All I know is like a lot of metal fans, at least people I know and I've seen out there, do, like myself, collect. And
mm,
some people collect like multiple versions. They'll have the original CD, they'll buy a remastered, and even have like a vinyl as well. So
yeah.
it really depends on the genres and stuff like that, but it's definitely a mixed bag.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I do maybe not right, well, not much right now, but I do try to still buy vinyls. Well, I say still buy vinyls. I think I should say I started buying vinyl for artists that I want to support a bit more because on one hand, it's like, yeah, the streaming for me is super convenient. You know, it's on my phone. I could when I'm driving, it's there. When I'm going for a
Yeah,
run, it's there. It's just so super convenient. So I don't want to stop that. But at the same time, recognizing that it doesn't necessarily support the artist in a great way, you know, things like vinyl became about. I came to vinyl completely through accident, just from a place I used to work, where I ended up finding pieces of vinyls in houses and keeping a few. Sounded like I'm stealing it right away. I'm just gonna leave. I'm not gonna explain it. If it sounded like I'm stealing vinyls on people's houses, whatever. I know. I'm not gonna explain what it was. Just think whatever. But anyway, used to work in a place and I found vinyls in people's houses and I ended up keeping a few. And from there, I started sort of collecting vinyls, and then it kind of occurred to me that this could be a cool way of supporting artists. So yeah, I bought a few pieces of vinyl from when they release. Not everybody releases stuff on vinyl, though. That's the thing,
yeah.
Some and when they do, it's usually a limited run, so you
Oh
kind
yeah,
of have to
for
get
sure.
in there quickly. But yeah, for anytime I can, yeah, I'll try and get pieces of vinyl, and I just love the artwork on vinyl because I mean, it's the same as a CD, I know, but it's bigger.
Oh
It
yeah,
feels
it
more like a thing than a CD does. You know what I mean? It just kind of feels more like I have an actual album as opposed to a copy of an album. Even though, yes, it is a copy of an album, I know that, but I guess it's kind of hard to explain.
well,
When
no,
you have the
I I
vinyl,
I
it
get it.
feels
It's
more like a real thing. You know?
Yeah, it's the album covers come to life a bit more because the colors and details will pop,
Mm,
and vinyl is something more of like an experience than a CD. The CD,
mm,
you just sort of pop in, you can listen to it in the background, it's in your car. But a vinyl, you don't have a record player. Well, I guess you could have a record player in your van or your car, but like
a bit awkward,
ultimately
skipping around.
ultimately, like a vinyl is more of something that you just do at home, and you just sort of, you can put on, you listen to while you're eating or you're cooking or you're just laying around. Like it's sort of
Mm,
a certain type of experience compared to a CD. So I definitely see vinyls and CDs being different, and
mm,
why people are collecting them now, especially in the metal community. It's like these things are ridiculous. Like every band I know comes out with one. Even like the most obscure bands come out with vinyls, and they do kinds of prints. They'll be like marble and splatter paint, and they'll be all sold out before the album even, is
Mm,
released. So it's become sort of a collector's thing, and something a bit like owning comics too, right? Like
yeah.
it's just nice to own, like nice to have a single issue instead of a volume. It's just a different feel.
Mm. All right. So speaking of heavy metal, speaking of comics, speaking of well, a little bit of games and things and geeky stuff, another crossover that I guess is quite prevalent in all those things is tattoos, and of course you have
Oh yeah.
loads of tattoos. You know, what was your first? Do you even remember your first tattoo at this point? Like, is it just?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I don't know, sort of see. Trying to turn my arm on the Blue Oyster Cult logo.
Oh, is that the one that looks like a question mark or?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, the Blue Oyster Cult. I always knew I wanted to get one when I was 18 because my mom was like, "You're not getting something until you're 18. I'm not signing off on anything." I was like, "All right, fine." And I wasn't quite 100% sure what I wanted to get, but I knew I wanted to get something, just a logo, something to start off with, and I just went with the. I know my first like six, and then I just disappears after that. I have no idea what direction I went.
So
uh,
what happens? Did you just like go to you wait? You got your first tattoo, and then was it like straight away you started getting more? Was there like time in between?
I waited like pretty much exactly a year because I was like, okay, I got this one. Um, I don't know exactly what direction I wanted to go after that, and then I just started getting some, and then some music ones and stuff like that, and just started going from there. I just started getting more and more ideas. So between like basically writing music and tattoos, like that's all I spent time doing was just coming up with ideas for and tattoos and music, and it just started going more and more from there. Very obsessive when it comes to completing things. Not like I know people will be like, "Oh, tattoos are addictive." I'm like, to a degree, but for me, I was just obsessive when it comes to completing something to like 100%. So that's why I got so heavily colored.
So what's the most recent tattoo?
Oh, oh crap! I think it
Oh,
was like trying to finish my palm. We did like an hour or so right in this section trying to do the yellow.
uh,
But I don't know how well that shows up.
shit, things come. Yeah, it's also come for okay. But yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, it's because I mean, I mean, my tattoos are. Got that one there, and I've got one on my shoulder, which I actually got this one when I was in Toronto, actually, it's in Canada. So
Oh,
yeah, this one I got in Canada. So there's my Canadian connection. But I'm basic when it comes to tattoos. I mean, and I found like a lot of people talk about how they're painful and stuff like that, and I guess I mean, in my experience, I say it's a little uncomfortable while you're getting it done, but not
yeah.
quite painful. But I guess it also depends on where you get it as well. I mean, for yourself, I mean, I think you got tattoos on your head as well. I mean, what was is that a painful spot to get a tattoo, or how's that feel?
Oh, definitely the top of the head was like the worst. You can't go anywhere. I felt every needle from beginning to end. It started resonating through my skull into my
Oh,
eyes. Um,
yeesh.
I definitely like what when I talk to people, they're like, oh, how painful are these? And you have so many, you must have a high pain tolerance. I'm like, well, I do have a high pain tolerance in general because of things I've dealt with in life,
Mm,
jobs and things like that. But for me, it's when it comes to the pain thing, it's based on person, placement, and your artist. If your artist is slow or fast, heavy-handed, even like I've had a heavy-handed artist, and it was quite painful. You're like, oh, like this guy's slow and he's hurting me, like as well as if they're a highly detailed artist that likes to use a lot of blending and with colors, it might take longer, so they're coming back to a spot that's already been tattooed, and they're blending in more color, so you're raw there, and you're tenderized.
Mm,
So you start to feel it more, especially like, I have my chest done, so he's doing black and then dark blue, then light blue and stuff. So by the time you get to the third color, your chest has just all been tenderized, and you're so sensitive, and
mm.
the pain difference from the very beginning, you're like, oh, this is fine, and then by the time you get to the third color, you're like, I can't wait for this to be over.
I mean, would you get it all in one sitting though, or would you like get a bit done, come back next week, get a bit more done? Because I know a few people have done it that way, where they've gotten like a little bit done, then come back, a couple of weeks later to get the rest done, and maybe and they do it over a period of like months sometimes. But
Yeah,
or you'll do yours all in one go.
I did that with my one artist. We were doing like a piece every week. He We would do, like, for instance, my chest, he did like this side and then this side and then back to this side and so on, and my arms that way. If he was working on one arm, we would do like one arm, and then next week we work on another arm. It's just overall, like, I know people might want to try to sit and get everything done in one go, but you heal better the less you take. Your
Mm.
body will react better. So if you just do like 2 hours or 3 hours at a time, and that would be better for you than some of these artists that want to push and get the whole 8 hour piece done. I'm like, that's hard on your body.
Mm.
That type of punishment, especially like if you're doing it like, on your ribs or something like that. So
Mm. Do you have any tattoos that you wish you didn't get? Any piece of ink where you afterwards you're like, actually, I don't even like that one anymore.
I'd say like it's just more so like I had an apprentice do my feet, and he didn't really, you know, it didn't turn out well. It sort of chewed up some of my skin. So
Mm.
it's okay, but I feel like I could do pieces over them, and it'd be better. It just didn't turn out as good as it should have, because he thought he could do something he couldn't.
Mm.
Like, he
So is that
wasn't
one
there
you'd
yet.
get? Would you get that one redone, or would you bother, or just leave it as it is?
Uh, I don't know. I've thought about doing those, but it's their feet, and feet kind of suck to get your feet done.
Mm.
Like, it hurts. Your feet are very tender. Uh, at least mine were. Um, but which is odd because I didn't really feel much on my hands, but for whatever reason, my feet were very tender. Maybe it was just because he was slow and heavy-handed. That could have been a case. It might have been much easier if it was a different guy.
Mm. Yeah, I keep thinking. Well, I don't keep thinking, but I do sometimes think I might get this one redone because it didn't heal particularly well, and just the image that I had in my head of the dove landing on the sword, I had the kind of this kind of epic kind of view in my mind of this dove landing on the sword, right? And then it kind of came out like this. I was like, I mean, it's not terrible. Well, I mean, it's not the
Yeah,
it just doesn't match what was in my mind, But at this point, I probably had it like this. I mean, when I was in Tehran, I was like 15 years ago, like 10, 15 years ago. So it's been like this a
oh yeah,
while. So on one hand, I kind of think to myself, yeah, I should get it redone. But then I don't know, it's been so long now. It's like, why bother? So
yeah. I
I don't
guess,
know.
yeah. Sometimes you feel like that. It's like I've been thinking of getting some touched up to brighten them a little bit, but or at least like the black. But
Mm.
like the rest of the spots, or my hands are fine. They glow pretty nicely.
All right. So yeah, we talked about quite a few things. I mean, yeah, so you're on YouTube.
Oh
You've
yeah.
been on YouTube for some years. I mean, you got the heavy metal channel. You've got the music, the comics channel, the wrestling channel. What out of all the things you do and all the things you're interested in, all the things you're passionate about, like what made you feel like I've got to be on YouTube to present these? Like, what was that kind of driving force of taking these things that you do and these things that you're passionate about and put them out onto YouTube?
Oh well, oh YouTube. It was pretty this idea that I had because to do my metal synopsis YouTube channel was kind of because being in a band motivated me to do that, mostly because I was tired of bands sort of stepping on each other that we would play with. Everybody was just trying to get like, a gig and things like that. And I just thought like, wow, this is a community that like should be, binding together and helping elevate each other, whereas like they were stepping on each other. And I was like, I want to do a YouTube channel or something like that where I help out bands build a community and just share music and share it on a positive, detailed note,
Mm,
and just help out. Mostly I primarily talk about bands that nobody knows really, like from all kinds of countries all over the world. And I just wanted to, that was sort of the driving force, was to just sort of help get bands out there and sort of set an example, I guess, to like, why don't we just, we can all get fans, we can, and you can grow more if we're all just together
yeah.
sharing each other's music. It's better than trying to be like one force and stepping on each other's shoulders just trying to get gigs. Burning bridges doesn't really help. I've seen bands that have, you know friends, and they help each other grow over time. And help out when they grow, get a little bigger, they suggest the bands they played with down in the beginning and stuff. So that was sort of the motivating factor behind my YouTube channel, was to sort of help bands, and especially obscure bands, and try to build an audience, I guess, and see if I couldn't get them some new fans somehow. It's worked surprisingly.
Yeah, no, I've seen a few bands reach out to you to sort of do stuff, and that's awesome, man. Like I think when you started, it was just you just like talking about a few bands that I mean, like you say, not many people have heard of them. Maybe they're just starting out, or they just haven't really got that kind of following. A lot of people put stuff on Bandcamp and just hoping for the
Yeah,
best. And you start talking about them, and that kind of built up. And then it just seems like little bit by little bit, people start paying attention, and more and more people start like coming in and commenting and talking about their views on the bands you're talking about. And then, so yeah, that's a pretty cool thing. You kind of sort of snowballed a little bit, into is what it is now, where you got people sort of contact you and saying, "Hey, man, we're doing something, and perhaps you'd like to do something with it," and that's
yeah.
awesome.
And I think what's really good is a lot of the bands that are reaching out to me are just some band from like Ukraine or Belgium, or Britain, Finland, Sweden, right? Like all these bands are reaching out to me. They're small in their country, but they're reaching out to Canada as well. And I think that's sort of my niche to a degree, is like,
Mm,
trying to, reach out to somebody in Canada and share it here and see
yeah.
what we can do here. Like I know for my band, through this whole process, I've come in contact with a couple of Swedish guys, and one of them has been a huge driving force to why we've sold pretty much most of our shirts and merch to Sweden,
Mm,
because he's been sharing it with his metal friends and stuff like that. And that's sort of the thing. Like what I want to do here is share it with my metal friends here in Canada and the people on YouTube, and see if they can't get a couple of new followers, and then they share it with their friends. It's just, yeah, like you said, it's a snowball thing. One person, and then they share it with five, and so on and so on and so on, right? So I feel like it's kind of, I encourage bands that are small from Europe or Asia or the Middle East or whatever to reach out to me, because you're trying to, see what happens with a Canadian or North American audience.
mm. All right, and well, I guess that's a good place to kind of wrap this up. But yeah, good, nice, positive message to end on. That it's better to help people than to try and step on people's toes. I think there's way too much people step. And look, we're all trying to get somewhere. I get it. We're all trying to do our thing. We're all trying
Oh
to
yeah,
make something. But it's better to be helpful. It's better to be compassionate than it is to just like be mean and step on people's toes and not care about how it affects other people. It's better to just come
oh
together
yeah.
and see what
I
happens.
definitely
You know.
agree with that. It's definitely helped me more when I just authentically or genuinely just help people for no gain. I just do it, and then they remember that. So
Mm. Yeah, all comes back some way,
yeah, it usually does. I find
some.
it.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a thing. Like I mean, no, well, I guess it's a bit too. Let's get too philosophical, but when you do something for somebody, you do it because you just feel it's the right thing to do, not necessarily because you want something from them. Um, but yeah, oftentimes, you keep doing that. Sometimes something does come back to you, and not necessarily in a way that you might think it would, or you might be even expecting, or sometimes not even the way you might want. It'd just be
Yeah.
like something that happens in just the most unexpected way, and you just think, oh, actually, yeah, that does help me out. So yeah, I just feel like putting good out into the world, even if it doesn't necessarily come back to you in that direct way, or even if it may not come back to you for a while, just putting out good into the world is never going to be a bad thing.
Oh
Just
yeah, yeah. And people remember and might, like that's what I get with my YouTube channels. The guy says like this is a guy who just talks about, the details and positive light on your music, even if he's not like die hard into it and wants to praise it or something. He's just like, finds the positive work that you're putting into something, and that's why, it's my channel's growing with obscure artists and stuff that
mm,
reach out to me. I have tons of them on my Facebook, these musicians that I talk with and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. Maybe they'll remember me and they'll share my band down the line or
maybe.
something, right? Like,
Hey, it could be. Maybe one day one of them's like headlining, I don't know, Glastonbury or something. They're like, hey, you know what? Let's get Sennedra up here. And
yeah,
hey,
it's
you
exactly
never
it.
know, right? You never know.
I've already had that happen to some degrees where they've shared my music in their countries and stuff with people. They weren't big bands, but they still flipped it
Yeah.
on. So yeah, they did the same thing for me. So it's
All right. So before we finish up today, Andrew Sennedra, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Do you have any last things you'd like to say or share? Anything that you're doing? Where can people find you? All that sort of stuff.
Well, I guess they can find me on my YouTube channel. I'm sure you'll probably have links and stuff in the description below, like
Yeah.
we always do.
You have a
Uh,
Twitter, by the way, or Insta or anything like that? Or just YouTube?
oh, we did have an Instagram, but we don't really post on there too much. But it's mostly just, yeah, my YouTube channels. I have Andrew Sennedra is my metal one. Silver Knight Comics is obviously the comic one. Guel Fight Wrestle Hut is the ridiculous sort of wrestling channel that I have with Captain Witchfingers, which is quite ridiculous. I guess the important one that I should probably shout out is my band one, Sennedra Band Camp, as well.
Mm.
It was a good one for us, and I think that's about it. Facebook. I don't even remember my Facebook. I think it's just Andrew Sennedra. I'm
Yeah,
just so used to copying and pasting the link.
yeah, that's cool. I'll drop a few links in the description for people to check out. But yeah, that's gonna be all for now, dude. I really appreciate you coming through, man. So yeah, hopefully this is something that I'll be able to do more of. Just chat to people from the internet. That's what I'm calling this. People from the internet, and talk about all kinds of stuff. Talk about inspirations and passions and things like that. So for anybody watching, if you got suggestions, recommendations, people you might want to have a chat with, yeah, let me know in the comments as well. I see if I can get in touch with them. But yeah, that's going to be all for now. So guys, thank you for watching. Until whenever, if ever, peace.
All right.